This is a versus battle between two fighters who have two opposite fighting styles. Todo is a grade 1 sorcerer who gets close in on an opponent in order to overwhelm them with his strength, while Geto is a grade 1 sorcerer who fights mostly at a distance and uses cursed spirit manipulation in order to overwhelm the opponent. Also, just because it isn't like extreme common knowledge, we know Geto was grade 1 back when he was in high school because of this diagram that we see when he tries to absorb Toji's cursed spirit. As you see there, Geto is grade 1. It isn't until a year after the incident when he is deemed a special grade. Now, I thought about the outcome of this fight a lot, and there are pretty convincing arguments for both sides. Today I've gathered what I think are the best arguments for this versus battle, and by the end of the video, you should have an idea of who you think wins the fight. But before we get into the video, I want to say if you enjoy JJK content, then I would really appreciate if you could leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel, as I post videos every couple days on different topics you guys give me, and a few I come up with on my own. Now let's get into the video. So to start off, we should cover Todo first, his abilities, and how he would fight against Geto. So we first get introduced to Todo when he's fighting against Megami, and he basically asks Megami the question of what type of woman he likes. Of course, Megami gives the wrong answer. So after Todo blitzes him initially, Megami takes a step back and says, Todo, could he be that Todo? Last year, an unprecedented Jujutsu terrorist attack that became known to be the Shinjuku Tokyo Nightline of 100 demons was led by the curse user Geto. 6 cursed spirits, 5 grade 1 and 1 special grade appeared on the Nightline. They were defeated by Todo single-handedly. How did a grade 1 sorcerer win up against a special grade curse? So I already get this backstory on Todo before he even begins to fight, that he's supposed to be this tough guy who's able to beat a special grade curse without even using his curse technique. And so Megami basically asks him, and he's like, I hear you refuse to use your curse technique. And Todo just says, oh, that's a rumor, I use it against this special grade. So we know that Todo will use his curse technique if he deems the opponent strong enough. And as the fight continues, he just begins to blitz Megami completely. He dashes behind him so fast that Megami and even his frogs are still looking forward, and then Todo just picks him up and slams him on the ground. He then continues to throw him through the entire building, and he just goes flying. Eventually, Megami is able to restrain him with the toads that are nearby before the fight ends, because Inumaki comes in and tells them both to stop moving. This was just the introduction, but the best things that we see from Todo next or when he actually fights against Hanami with Yuji by his side. As they begin to fight, we basically see this moment where Yuji and Todo go to hit Hanami at the same time, and they both hit Hanami. And Hanami says, what a heavy hit. It's not quite as heavy as the Black Flash hit from earlier, however, individually they have enough power to hurt me. So we do know that, Yuji and Todo at this point have around the same level of AP. They both hit around the same level of force, and both of their punches are strong enough to actually damage Hanami on their own. They can jump Hanami, which is what they do. Even though they don't end up exercising Hanami, it is just important to note that individually they both have enough power to hurt and damage Hanami. For the most part of the fight, Todo hadn't used his curse technique at all, but it wasn't until after Hanami ripped the bandage off of his arm and Hanami decided to take the fight a bit more serious, where Todo says, yeah, it's about time, I'm gonna release my curse technique. And this is a moment where we learn that Todo is extremely analytical. He's not like this meathead, strong gym guy that people try to subscribe to Todo's character. Todo actually is very smart, especially with combat smarts, as he begins to analyze all of Hanami's abilities and ways to beat him. First he breaks down the wooden ball that Hanami uses, then the cursed bud, then the flower field, and then he even looks at the appendage that Hanami has on his arm. And after looking at all of these, Todo basically says, after he looks at all of the outcomes, the one that should be had is victory. And he says this is because he's not alone, this is because he has Yuji fighting by his side. It's funny that right after he says this, Hanami just grabs his foot and sends him flying into some branches in the back. But right before Todo hits the branches, he claps his hands and switches with Hanami. This is the first time we saw Boogie Woogie get used, and this is where we quickly learned that if you're a sorcerer fighting Todo and you throw an attack at him or try to lead him into an attack, it can just backfire on yourself, as he can swap places with you. And after experiencing it for the first time, Hanami says it's a simple but troublesome curse technique. And Todo begins to explain, yup, my curse technique lets me trade places with someone else. And he tells Yuji it's best that they hurry up and finish the fight quickly before Hanami gets used to the swapping, which makes sense because if you're just swapping all over the place and you're either making a pattern with your swapping and you're just becoming predictable, then you're basically ruining the surprise aspect of your curse technique. So when Todo unleashes a curse technique, he tries to unleash it, then beat you down fast before you can get used to it. And since Todo won't have anybody on his team in the fight against Geto, he will only be able to swap with things that have curse energy, and that would mean that he can swap with Geto's curses. And that's going to be very important important, as we get further into the versus battle, especially when we get to Geto's side. So just keep that in mind. If Todo can swap with things that have curse energy, he should be able to swap with Geto's curses. After jumping Hanami a bit more, Todo does this sort of fake out clap, like he claps, but he and Yuji don't switch places. This messes up Hanami so badly that Hanami gets hit with a black flash from Yuji just from standing still. And Todo says, a clap doesn't necessarily mean I'm using my curse technique. It's simple but effective. But this is like the second variable in his curse technique. The first one being you don't know where he's going to swap with or where he's going to go after he claps. And the second one being after you try to get a feel for where he's going to swap, you can just do a fake out clap and just not swap at all. So the technique itself is very disorienting. Like I imagine it would be very annoying to fight against this curse technique, but it's also not like extremely broken either. It's just a very solid, annoying technique to deal with because it's not a technique that like ups his stats, right? It's just a technique that swaps him places where you might not expect. So in a way, you could say that it's just as good as like normal curse techniques that do amp stats. That's to each his own. After jumping Hanami a bit more, Todo goes more in depth about what his curse technique is. He says, hey, special grade, you must have realized that I didn't tell you the whole truth. But there's one more thing you need to think about. The applicable targets of my Boogie Woogie curse technique. Are the targets I can switch to limited to living things? No. My curse technique is also effective on objects such as cursed puppets. So the answer is anything that possesses curse energy above a certain level. Hey special grade, have you noticed yet? We're back here, something's lying in sleep. And he swaps Yuji out with Playful Cloud. And even after hitting Hanami with this Playful Cloud, Hanami just begins to keep fighting after he absorbs some more plant life. So you'd have to keep in mind that even though Todo is extremely powerful, even though they have been jumping and beating up Hanami, they actually can't fully exercise Hanami, Now there is a point after this where Hanami actually begins to open a domain expansion, but thankfully Gojo comes and steps in. Now I don't think it would have been the end for Todo if he got caught in the domain, because we do know that Todo does have anti-domain techniques like simple domain. You see him use them in Shibuya, which I'm going to get into. But after Mahito tries to open a domain against Todo, he begins to activate a simple domain. So I do believe Todo would have just done the same here and he probably would have been okay. But we'll never actually know because we didn't get to see it happen. But the main takeaway from this fight is that he can swap with anything that has curse energy above a certain level. And he is also extremely analytical. He's not like this meathead guy who's just strong. He pays attention to everything the opponent is doing and then finds ways to try to break them down. Now the next fight we have to go over, and this is probably the most important fight to talk about when it comes to scaling for Todo, is his fight with Mahito and Yuji. The first interaction he has with Mahito tries to like run up on him, talking about, hey, speak up Todo, I can't hear you. He's all confident. And as Mahito gets closer to Todo just claps and swaps a Mahito and then kicks him in the back. And Mahito says, amazing, even though I know how it works, it's still so disorienting. So even though he knows how Boogie Woogie works, like even if you have knowledge of it, it still is disorienting to deal with because ultimately every decision and where you'll have to look at is up to Todo. Todo decides where you react to. He can swap with anything, so as long as he has things with curse energy around, the pace of the fight is up to him. Unless, of course, you can overwhelm Todo and beat him up before he gets a chance to overwhelm you with Boogie Woogie. And we'll get into that in a second. Now, as they begin to fight, I do want to point out one thing. Todo scaling to Yuji and Mahito in this moment isn't too impressive because both Yuji and Mahito are severely weakened. Mahito provides evidence towards this idea as the fight begins. He says, the top-knot gorilla's soul is at full health. Can I kill him with one touch in the state I'm in? I'd say Itadori's soul is at about 10% and I'm at 40%. My double being crushed, the rush of the attacks, and that black flash hit took a lot out of me, all because of that stupid girl. For ain't nobody, she really left her mark. What Mahito's basically getting at is that because his soul is so weakened, he also is as well. Like he said that taking all of these attacks took a lot out of him. And also we do know that curse energy does come from negative emotions. We know that emotions come from the soul. So you can sort of view it as if your soul is affected, then the thing that provides curse energy is also weakened, which can affect you as a sorcerer. So because Yuji's soul is so weakened, that being at 10%, he most likely is very weakened as well. And like Mahito says, Todo is the only person here who is at 100%. Because, Yuji has been through a lot of fights. Yuji just got done fighting Choso, and then he had to fight Mahito some chapters before this, and now he's coming back for a second round with Mahito. Mahito had just got done fighting Yuji some chapters before this as well, but meanwhile, Todo, he's just at 100%. He's been chilling. So for the fact that he scales to Yuji and Mahito and he's the only guy here at 100%, isn't as impressive as people actually think. Like, he should be doing what he does, It would be embarrassing if he was still underperforming while being the only person at 100%. Now, there is a moment towards the end of the fight where Mahito opens up his domain and we see Todo go to activate a simple domain. Now, yes, Todo was too slow in his activation, so his arm does begin to get transfigured. But, Todo thinking quickly does cut his own arm off. But, sadly, he does get hit by a black flash to the stomach, and it lays him out for the time being. But we do know that Todo is able to get back up and help Yuji defeat Mahito in the end. Now, because Todo lost his arm, he can't use Boogie Woogie anymore, but don't worry, it's okay. I am using the Todo in this fight that has Boogie Woogie, but it is just, important to note that if you do take off Todo's hand, or if you do restrain his hands in any way, then he won't be able to clap and he won't be able to swap with anything. Which essentially means that while Todo is aggressive and fights mainly with his hands, he also has to be careful because if at any point he loses one of his hands or one of his hands becomes so mangled that he can't clap anymore, then his curse technique will essentially be dead. So the main things to remember for Todo going into this versus battle is that he is very analytical and he is very smart when it comes to combat. He also does like to overwhelm the opponent quickly because he doesn't have anything to really fight at a distance. And his curse technique can swap with anything that has curse energy above a certain level. And even though he is very fast, as long as you are around his same level of speed, or you can even be a bit slower, you can restrain him if you have a curse technique that allows you to summon things to do so. An example of that being Megami at the end of his fight, when he actually restrains Todo with his frogs. And last but not least, he does use his curse technique by clapping his hands. So if any point you mangle one of his hands, take it off, or damage it to the point he cannot clap, you will eliminate his curse technique, and at that point, he would just be a brawler in front of you. So with all of that being said, let's get into Geto's fighting style, his abilities, and how he would interact in a fight with Todo. Now we know that Geto was a part of the strongest along with his best friend Satoru Gojo. Those two were known as the strongest around. Now we actually don't have too much to work off of when it comes to, scaling Geto back when he was in high school. But we do know that he should be around the same level as Gojo before his awakening. And this is backed by the fact that him and Gojo have gotten into fights multiple times. So they definitely do know how strong each other are. So he should be around the same level as Gojo from this time, but because we do know it isn't until after the incident with Toji, a year later, that Geto does finally say yeah, now Gojo just is the strongest because of this new mastery that Gojo has over his limitless abilities. But as for the time being, in hidden inventory, they both just are around the same level of power, which again, is backed up by the fact that it's stated they fought often and Geto is always confident in fighting Gojo again. So I'll quickly go over the Toji fight and let me just get this out of the way now because I did see some people making this argument. Some people believe that Toji is equal to Gojo from pre-awakened, before Gojo got his awakening. And then they believe that since Geto and Gojo are the same level of strength, that Toji should actually be the same level as Geto. But that's just clearly isn't the case. Toji is obviously much more powerful than Geto as he begins to beat him down, which is what I'm about to get into. I know that as Toji enters the tunnel to come fight Geto, he summons this big dragon looking curse in which Toji just begins to shoot it. And as Toji begins to talk more, Geto just says screw it and he sends his dragon curse towards Toji, but Toji just rips it open using his soul split katana very easily. Now we also know that Geto has this sort of curse, you can call it, that has its own innate domain pack, and it's that girl with that creepy face where she asks, "Am I pretty?" And when confronted with it, Toji says, "An imaginary vengeful spirit, an innate domain with a pact that cannot be broken until the question is answered." And Toji just says, "You're not my type," to which he begins to get cut around the ears. And we see these big shears appear on his arm and legs as well. But of course, because Toji is so powerful, he just begins to fight all of it off. And this is where Geto tries to come up behind Toji and absorb his curse. But unfortunately for Geto, it doesn't work. And because of this, Toji begins to just cut Geto up. He slices him around his chest and kicks him to the ground. and this was enough to beat Geto. Now I do want to say, there is an argument that Geto was nerfed in this fight because Geto had just learned that his best friend just died, or at least in his mind from what Toji told him, he is fighting this whole time on the belief that his best friend is dead. And we know that there is this thing within Jujutsu Kaisen where you have to be in the right headspace to, fully wield all of your power. There is a chance that because Geto had just learned that his best friend had died, he was very shaken up by it and wasn't able to fight at maximum capacity, but it's really just up to interpretation. I personally do believe that Geto was affected in some way, especially like mentally affected after learning that his best friend had died, but like I said, it's up to interpretation. Now we do know that when it comes down to curse spirit manipulation, Geto can actually house an infinite number of curses. I know it sounds insane, but I'm not making that up. It actually is just stated in the fan book. Gege says that Geto can just house as many curses as he wants to. So going into this fight with Todo, we don't know the exact number of curses he keeps on him, but we do know that he routinely does absorb a bunch of curses, so he would have a good amount going into this fight with Todo. And we do know that he would for sure have that dragon curse that he summoned against Toji, and he would also have that bird curse that he uses to fly up and catch the star plasma vessel from falling from the building. Now it is hard to link Geto and Todo to each other in terms of speed, but I'll just give you guys this argument. There is an argument that, speed wouldn't really be that much of a factor in a fight against Geto, or at least not as much as you would think. So as we know, Naobito was around during the time that Geto and Gojo were known as the strongest. And unless you think that Naobito actually got stronger between the ages of like 53 to 70, then that would mean that Geto was stronger than a more of a prime Naobito, you could say, or like a younger Naobito than in today's day. And then we do know that Naobito is stronger than a base Dagon, not the Dagon that opens up the domain. Naobito is just able to beat down Dagon with pure speed and force. And then we do know that Dagon should be more durable than Hanami. And here's the argument for, the fact that Dagon should be more durable than Hanami. You remember when Nanami tried to swing and hit Dagon? They said that that hit basically did no damage. And there's a statement going into Shibuya where Ino says Yuji and Nanami have about the same striking power. So if you grant both of those things is true, then that means that Yuji and Nanami having about the same striking power and Nanami not being able to damage Dagon, but Yuji is able to damage Hanami, would mean that Dagon has more durability than Hanami. But there are some ways you can be sort of skeptic towards this statement by saying, oh, maybe Ino doesn't know what he's talking about, but it is just an argument to keep note of. So it is just sort of a way of getting like this Team Geto over Hanami in a way, and then we know that of course Hanami should be stronger or to Todo relative in terms of strength. So you can sort of go that way with it. And even though Naobito is around, closer to his prime than in present day, it still didn't matter. Geto still was known as stronger than he was. So if you grant those things as true, then you can just sort of say, even if Todo is a bit faster than Geto, which, we don't know, even if he was a bit faster, it shouldn't be that much of a problem because of all the tools that Geto has at his disposal, like his cursed spirits. And if you don't agree with that line of scaling, then here comes the next part where we just have two characters where we don't know how fast they are in comparison to each other. So now it just comes down to their abilities and strength. And when it comes down to how their abilities interact with each other, there's sort of a dilemma we have with Geto and summoning a bunch of curses. So say if Geto summons 10 curses on the battlefield, that would actually be more targets for Todo to swap with, basically disorienting Geto, so it would actually be bad for Geto to summon more than one curse at a time. But at the same time, Geto should be able to summon curses and catch Todo off guard a couple times, just like I said back when Megumi was fighting Todo, and Megumi was able to summon his Shikigami, the toes, to come grab Todo. Todo wasn't prepared for that, so if the same thing were to happen in a fight with Geto, Geto would actually have some stronger cursed spirits to either catch Todo, either hold him down or give him enough time to go and hit Todo on his own. Another thing to keep note of is that curse spirit manipulation can be used, of course, on defense as well. You can set curses up in different areas, and you can also block attacks with the curses. We see Kenjaku do that in his fight with Yuki. That shouldn't be something that is Kenjaku specific because, it seems pretty common sense that if you have curse spirit manipulation, you can block attacks with these curses. And also, like I said earlier, even though Todo would want to come in close, If one of these curses were to ever like bite his hand or do severe damage to his hand, or if one of the curses is enough to keep Todo in place for a long enough time for Geto to come harm Todo himself, then it would be bad for Todo as he would lose his hand and then lose the ability to use Boogie Woogie. And Boogie Woogie really is the strongest thing for Todo to use in this fight. Now, I will say this, I did run a poll on my community tab asking you guys who you think won the versus battle and why. And the poll was up for 4 hours, and after it got 7,000 votes, 80% of the people actually thought that Team Geto would beat Todo. Which, you know, isn't a bad belief. You know, it does make sense that Team Geto should be stronger than Todo, especially if you go with that line of scaling that I provided earlier with, you know, the whole Naobito, Dagon, Hanami sort of thing. You know, that does make sense. And as for my opinion on who wins the fight, you know, I definitely don't think it's a one-sided stomp either way. But if I had to choose a winner, I would lean more towards Geto winning this fight. Now, I don't blame you if you think Todo wins the fight, because like I said earlier, there are arguments for both sides, but I do believe most of the arguments lean in Geto's favor, especially the line of scaling I brought up earlier with Naobito, and along with the fact that Geto has consumed a bunch of curses, and he could use different curses as defense and offense while also getting a feel for Todo's strength. Along with the fact that Geto can use curse spirits to block attacks all at the same time of having different curse spirits be on the offense. Because we know that Geto can give commands to his cursed spirits. We see in the hidden inventory he sets up different curses as surveillance, and then we see in volume 0 that he gives all of his curses the command to destroy. So during the fight with Todo, he would not only have a bunch of curses at his disposal, he would also have them with different commands, some attacking and some defending. And at some point, I believe that what would happen to Todo is something along the lines of what we saw hinted at towards the end of his fight with Megami, where the toads grabbed his limbs. At some point, Todo will probably get overwhelmed by the amount of curses or get dealt a lethal blow before he can really get going. Or he may even lose one of his hands, or a hand may be so damaged that he would lose his curse technique. He would then be at a disadvantage for the rest of the fight. And with that being said, thank you for making it to the end of the video. And if you enjoyed the video, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I post videos every couple days on different topics that you guys give me and I feel come up with on my own. Thank you for watching. See you next time.